I'm Jason Klom, and this is the Comedy on Vinyl podcast. The year is 1960, sort of. That's the release date of the album. The album, Will Rogers. The artist, Will Rogers. My guest this week, Katie Mears. Thank you so much for doing the show again.
Hello. Yes, I'm so happy to be back, and I was so happy to hear that no one had talked about Will Rogers before, so we have a lot to cover today.
We really do. And before you had, before you decided that this was what we were going to talk about, and I apologize for anybody listening, there's going to be some fucking beeping of a truck in the background. That's just the reality of the world I live in, apparently. I guess I thought I knew about Will Rogers, but there's plenty I did not know about him, so having to dig in was kind of fun.
Yeah, so tell me about, what did you think of when you thought about Will Rogers before you dove in?
Corn pone humor. Now I remember that's it, and knowing, I think, a few of the quotes, never met a man I didn't like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And knowing enough that I was like, I'm pretty sure he was a liberal guy because most of the time actual political satirists are liberal, fairly liberal or left leaning. And I think that's about it. I had no idea that he was a quarter Cherokee. Didn't know that about his background. Pretty fascinating.
There's a lot of he's a really interesting person who is just gone. It seems like like he is quoted now and then, but the mediums that he excelled at, primarily writing columns and doing radio, are not mediums that age particularly well. So he is kind of lost in the annals of time, I suppose, except for nerds like us that can come and chat about him. But he was huge, and huge on a scale that I think it's hard to think about nowadays, just because there were fewer things to watch and read and listen to back then. But at the height of his career, just saying this at the top, he was read by over 40 million people every single day. He had a daily column. Yeah, which is more than a third of the population at that time. So everyone knew who Will Rogers was. Everyone loved him. And I talked with my grandmother a lot, which we can get into, but she said that was a huge part of her and her father. They would listen, and that's kind of just what people would talk about until he talked again. And it was this beautiful shared culture. Will Rogers was a huge, he was a part of the family for a lot of these people during the Depression, especially.
I love that. I also love that you've picked something that is, if you're, oh God, I'm dying. Hold on.
You okay there?
Oh boy. Hey, I'm a professional broadcaster and I didn't drink water before we started. Fuck me. I love that you picked something that I think generically would be thrown in the old time radio category, but is not boring. I love some old time radio. I love Jack Benny. I love bits and pieces, but I have these old time radio collections and you just listen to them and they're just dull as fuck. At the very least, this is its own thing. And he's a humorist who is making his own stuff, and clearly for some of it making it up as he went along, or at least very good at sounding like he did. That's the first thing that stood out to me, is his completely unpolished style, which maybe have been entirely intentional. I can't tell if he polished himself to a non-polished version, or if he just decided, this is how I speak and this is how I'll always speak on stage. I'd love to know.
Yeah, sure. I think just at the heart of it, he is so beautifully comfortable being on stage, being behind a microphone. Everything he says sounds like a person just kind of musing on a front porch. He has an ease and a comfort to him that I think just makes me feel kind of safe. He's just a gentle, nice, he has a little bit of Mr. Rogers in him. Yeah. He has just kind of this really wonderful presence. And I think he was smart enough to know that he possessed a background and a collection of experiences and a perspective that the common man and that the people would enjoy. And I think he was a good enough vaudevillian to know how to lean into that. But I wouldn't go so far as to say it was manufactured. Right. I think Will Rogers is Will Rogers. Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly hope that's the case, because otherwise I just feel I don't know. There's not enough about his formal education. Maybe there wasn't. He'd said he quit high school at grade 10 or whatever. Maybe he didn't have any formal education beyond that. But
no, he was in and out of Catholic and military schools for a while.
Okay.
But then he worked on cattle drives basically after school, worked on like ranches and stuff. And then he was a world traveler for a period of time. He was like a gaucho in Argentina for a
Saw
while.
that.
I don't know if
Yeah.
you knew that.
Uh-huh.
And then he was in like a American cowboy show in South Africa as well. And then he made it back to the US, started doing vaudeville, and then went to Hollywood. That's like the Cliff Notes version. We can get more into his bio if you want.
Oh, I love that. I love this shit. I love stories where the midpoint is vaudeville always.
Yeah. Well, it's such a good training ground. Oh my gosh. Should we talk about what this album actually is? Because
sure.
It's not, is this the oldest album you've ever covered?
My God. I mean, you know, in terms of the actual content, yeah, because you said this is from what, right towards the end of his life, right?
Yeah.
35? So I would imagine so. I don't know that we've yet talked about some old racist cylinders, which at some point will probably come up, but.
Well, like just for context, he died in 1935, right? And so Red Fox was like 12 when Will Rogers died. Like if we want to talk about how old this is.
Yes, right. Yeah. That's a good point.
This is way further back. It's not an album in the sense that we know an album to be. It's just sort of a collection of snippets that survived from his old radio show. So it was recorded in, I think, 35 and then released in 65. So yeah, I think it's definitely the oldest thing. Definitely the oldest thing on my shelf.
He had very few things released during his lifetime, although it's a little annoying that some of these things have unknown dates to them. But like during his lifetime, I see 2, maybe 3 records at all. And they were probably singles, 10 inches. So yeah, but after he died, what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 compilations of various versions of the wit and wisdom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
He's very snippetable. And I can't help but think of him in the same way that I think of Twain, who, I've done a ton of work on Twain as a humorist, and I think Will Rogers is in very many ways the bridge between Mark Twain and stand-up comedy. I think he's like a huge part of that translation. And I think this is maybe a wild theory. I don't think it's that wild. I think it holds water. But Mark Twain, if you don't know, if you're not in the like scene or whatever, you think Mark Twain and you think Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, right? Like that's what people know. And Mark Twain was smart or lucky or whatever you want to call it enough to write novels, and novels age better than obviously lectures and radio and columns. But I think if he hadn't written those novels and just did all of the other wonderful things he did, I think he would be just in the same exact place that Will Rogers is, which is we quote them from time to time, but we don't think much deeper than them. But Will Rogers made like 4 movies in the 2 years before he died, and he had signed a contract to make, I think, 20. So if he would have lived another 10 years, I really think 10 or 20, I think he would have been huge. I think he died before people were making movies that are watchable by modern standards, because it was a different, hold on. I wrote down some of the movies that came out 10 years after he died. Like, so within 10 years of his death, you had Casablanca, Wizard of Oz, Citizen Kane, Gone with the Wind. Like, when you think of old movies, that's what you think of. I don't know anyone that watches movies casually pre-1935. I watched Judge Priest, one of his movies is actually on YouTube right now, and I watched pieces of it while I was going down my Will Rogers rabbit hole. But it doesn't have the same punch. I don't think people really knew how to make movies in the modern sense just yet. No. It
was bordering on documentary and narrative. It's like we have a story, but it's almost like the very idea that we're pointing a camera at something is novel enough still. Yeah. So
there was still some pacing and some story concepts that needed to be, I think, ironed out for movie making at large. But all of that said, I would have loved to have seen that happen, but I think it's really hard to separate him from Twain, in my brain at least. I also think, and we're going to probably talk about this more, and we've already talked about this, which is his ease and his affect when he is speaking and when he's performing. But I think he, along with Twain, have this great benefit of not wanting to be showbiz people when they were like kids. They didn't have that trajectory in mind.
Right.
Like Will Rogers wanted to be a cowboy. Mark Twain wanted to be a riverboat pilot. You know, they both had like real Americana dreams. You know, they were like real people.
Thank
and so
God
when
YouTube
their
didn't
lives
exist yet. That's all I'm saying.
yeah, when their lives pivoted into the spotlight and pivoted into showbiz, they were real people. And I think that really helped them as performers, not just because we all know those comedians who really need the love and the laughter, and that can be a little icky sometimes. You know, I think
put it mildly,
people can smell that on comedians, and I think comedians suffer from that more than other artists might have to suffer for that. Because you know, you don't want to laugh at someone who really wants you to laugh at them. but I think he and Twain really benefit from having been real people first, and then becoming show folk, because they have things to pull from and they know who they are. Which is something comedians talk about all the time, is you really need to have a life worth commenting on. That's the Pete Holmesy way of it all. But
sure, it does make me
it makes you a person.
For sure. It also makes me think of, and I don't want this to sound cynical at all, though. It does make me wonder, is at some point, though, because I listen to, I'm sure a lot of the podcasts you've listened to where it's been a bunch of fucking stand-ups, and don't get me wrong, I like listening to a bunch of fucking stand-ups talk about, well, you got to find your character, blah, 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 and that's great. You got to find your voice. I mean, you do then wonder, like, the cynical part of my brain, or maybe the skeptic part, is just then, okay, so you found your voice, you stick with that voice. I do wonder how often that voice then becomes, I don't know, it becomes a character. It has to be a character. It's not you. So there is still a differentiation, and then the voice also has to evolve with you. Otherwise, it's still not really your voice. And if you're sticking with the old, I don't know. There's a lot to be dug out.
Well,
here.
I think what we're circling around here is, are you going inside out or are you going outside in?
Yeah.
Right? Like, are you a person with a perspective in this world and with a life and with principles and opinions and experiences who then says, oh, this person could be good at performing and could be good at having, you know, things that people want to hear? Or are you saying, I want to say things people want to hear. How do I build and manufacture that? Which seems infinitely harder. But if you want to be a comedian, then you don't really have a choice. You sort of have to think about yourself as sort of a science experiment. You have to think about who you want to be, which is already so hard in life to think about who you want to be, but then have to make sure that's like a marketable idea is incredibly difficult. And I couldn't imagine being those kids that were like 10 years old wanting to be stand-ups, because you have to be so self-aware, and not just stand-up, but it's probably most art forms. But
yeah, well, I know what that was like, and I'll tell you, it was hell.
Yeah, tell me.
It's hell. I didn't want to be a
Were you like a little drama kid or something?
No, I hated everybody at school, so I tried drama once and got my lines taken away from me, and it was just a further fuck you. So I hated everybody.
Wait, you got your lines taken away?
Yeah, we did anything goes. And before this, by the way, I've been making my own videos and teaching myself improv since I was like 13. And then we go and we do anything goes, and I have a part, but then those lines are given to the child of one of the teachers who's running drama that year. And I was just like, what the fuck am I? So I just stand here and do nothing. And by the way, I was one of the few kids who could actually sing. And I was just like, you know, and so therefore I did not live enough for the drama that I wanted to stick around. So I left. And
yeah, you were like, peace out.
Yeah,
this
and it
lame.
Left a bitter taste. And I'm still not competitive to this day, because I'm like, fuck this. No, I'd rather walk away, which is maybe one of my, it's not a weakness, but it is definitely a strong decision I made.
Sure.
Yeah, but it is rough. Like, and I went through exactly what you're talking about in my 20s when I moved out here.
Did you?
Yeah, because like I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Am I a filmmaker? Am I a comedian? Am I a satirist? And trying to find yourself while also trying to make art that is supposed to be personal is weird, because one of those is going to lag.
Yeah,
usually.
Sure. And as much as, especially in this country, we are so like career minded and effort and Protestant work ethic and all of that stuff, you still have to be a person. And being a person is very difficult. Like, not to make light of all of these things, but it's really hard to just have like a functioning, is it so clear that I'm in my 20s right now? I feel like this really makes me seem so like young adult, but it's difficult, and I can't imagine doing it with all of these other things tacked upon it, you know?
No, you're perfectly. It doesn't matter. You're in your 20s. I used to judge people by their age. I'm tired of that shit. People did that to me too. Yeah, no, it's that's unfair. I mean, now, when I was in my 20s, here's what that usually is. Oh, you're young. No. What they're saying is, when I was young, I was a fucking idiot, and I was a fucking idiot in my 20s.
Sure,
I'm 100%.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, like,
my gosh.
I want to, well, I'm not going to make this about me, but I want to tell you one of the things that I guess I did not realize that fascinated me about him was that he was one of the early, and this is something I want to research, one of the early fake presidential campaign comedians. Maybe the first. I don't know that he was the first, but it's pretty fucking early. 1928.
Yeah.
Like, and which, by the way, a critical election. A critical election.
And the following cycle, it was him and the four Marx brothers as VP.
Good.
What an amazing!
So good. Damn it, that's good.
Yeah, it's incredible. There was there was just some like amazing quotes that I found about like the five of them running, and yet somehow still FDR was able to overcome that challenge, you know?
God damn it, I love
like,
it.
Oh yeah, thank goodness he wasn't, ousted by these little crazy boys. But yeah, so wait, tell me, you have run a fake campaign for a long time now, right?
Yeah, since 2004.
What's your connection here? Yeah, tell me all about that.
Well, once I did it, I mean, like, I think at the time when I started it, I was only aware of a few fake campaigns. The biggest one was Howard Stern. Howard Stern's campaign for president, or whatever the fuck it was pretty big and huge. And I was like, well, what is mine? And mine was like, okay, well, I want it to be a thing. I want it to be this mockumentary because I was just running on a slogan, and I was like, I thought that was funny. I was like, well, JK 2020, a perfect vision for the future was the whole thing. And I'm like, but I'm eligible in 2016. So then the gag became JK 2020, a perfect vision for the future. And then in parentheses, also running in 2016. And so then I didn't know what it was. I'm like, that's funny. That's a good gag. And then eventually started writing this mockumentary with these friends of mine. And for 16 years now, it's become a book, 2 movies, and it's going to be a podcast now.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I'm obsessed with this, and it very much became the same thing, except my character was a pompous ass and didn't realize that he was a nobody who didn't know enough about anything.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, and so because of that, and because of the various successes and failures of the comedy, and the fact that it's gone nowhere, I've become more obsessed with other people's, like Gracie Allen's her presidential campaign. I think she wrote a whole campaign book also, and I don't know, this shit is fascinating to me, especially when humorists do it.
Sure. Well, I think it's the best way to mock something, right? Is just to fully commit yourself to it, and then you can highlight every little thing within it.
I think
right?
so. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. At 24, I don't think I knew enough about politics to say anything acute. That's not true. I had a few things to say. But they were less out of experience and more out of sheer observation. But still, looking back, some of it's pretty good, pretty funny.
Gotcha. What did you think of Joe Exotic's presidential campain?
I have not watched that documentary and will not. So. Okay. He's one of now, if he were a humorist, I'd be interested in his campaign. He's just sounds like an insane person, and I then feel sorry for him, I guess. Except maybe he's a murderer or murder for hire man. I don't know what happened.
We don't we don't need to muddy those waters.
That's good.
But
that's fine.
He's a complicated person. He was a lot more complicated than someone like Will Rogers, who is very on the surface.
And I think there's a lot of cynicism that came out as a result of people like Will Rogers, because I think there became probably at some point like comedians exhausted with the idea that homespun wisdom has to be fake, and it has to be it's not real, and it's too cheesy. And listening to this, while he even literally repeats the same gag on a record, there's some really good shit throughout this one. I don't know what it's pulled from. Is it pulled directly from his radio show, or some of these sounded like they were actual gatherings and not radio shows?
Yeah, so there were moments when you could hear the crowd, but then there definitely were some radio shows, because you hear him say, last Sunday I talked about this.
Yes, you're right.
Sunday.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Do you know the story of like how he started in vaudeville, because he originally was just a cowboy guy. Like he originally just did rope tricks, and then he started doing like jokes in between them and things like that. And I've found this in multiple sources, but it feels just too perfect to be true. But as the story goes, he was doing a show in Madison Square Garden, and it was like a huge cowboy review. Do you know where I'm going with this?
No, I don't. No, please.
Okay, so as the legend has it, that this like steer got loose and was like heading towards the audience, and he got to have this heroic moment where he got to in real life rope this steer and like save these people, and out of nowhere he became this like huge legend hero, because these like city folk got to see this kind of brush with like real cowboydom.
Oh my God.
Isn't it a perfect story? I hope it's true. I don't
too.
think it is. It sounds too crazy. But that's when he was, doing vaudeville in New York, like in the teens.
That is brilliant.
And then he was doing this midnight show. It was like basically him and a bunch of like scantily clad women on this rooftop, right? It was like it wasn't Ziegfeld Follies, but it was something that Florence Ziegfeld was like putting on this rooftop. And so that drew a ton of repeat audiences. And that's when he started to do, what we know of Mort Saul. He started to do that. Okay, I have to have fresh things. I have to keep reading the newspaper. I have to keep having things to say. I think he had some one-liner about like he went on stage when the girls changed from nothing to nothing. It's like the joke there. But that's when he started to, become especially a comedian and a writer and a performer, and less of a roping fool.
I don't think I knew about the newspaper thing until also digging in. I didn't realize he was Mort Saul before Mort Saul. And also that really solidifies your theory even more about him being this midway of a comedian, because not just this is a gag, it's more, I have to have some shit ready. Like, I'm not just doing this vaudeville gag. I'm not doing these two, I'm not doing some double bill of these two dipshits where one's a straight man and one's not. I'm up here, I've got to say some shit. And yes, out of necessity, like that is unusual. That is not a vaudeville thing to do.
Right. Because remember, like, mainstream vaudeville humor at that time was pretty very simplistic, a lot of horseplay and slapstick and that sort of stuff. So he was operating on a very different level than most of that. But in terms of the Mort Saul comparison, Mort Saul did not like being compared to Will Rogers, which happened to him all the time. But he was like not a fan. I don't know if you know that or not.
No, but that doesn't entirely surprise me.
Well, I think Mort Saul, I'm not saying this isn't true, but I think he really likes to think of himself as an educated professorial kind of guy.
Sure.
And so I think I can pull up the quote, but the idea is that Rogers was someone who like was a yokel talking about the people in government, and Mort Saul saw himself as an educated man questioning the yokels in the government. Right? So he was the smart outside guy, where Will Rogers was just the guy who was like, isn't it silly the way we're doing this? Don't you reckon we could do it better? He didn't have any pretense, where Mort Saul, I think, Mort Saul wants you to know he's smart.
Sure.
And Will Rogers doesn't really care if you think he's smart. He just like has some ideas and some opinions.
Good God, is that the fucking differentiation in terms of like modern stand-up comedy? And that they all hey, don't forget, I'm smart, I know shit. I know things.
Sure, people want to have value. I get it. But that's one of the things when I spoke with my grandma about Will Rogers, she just talked about how nowadays she doesn't see comedians just allowed to breathe in this way. Will Rogers doesn't have the LPM. He doesn't have the laughs per minute, but he's just so easy, no urgency, truthy, and just, hey, let me tell you about what's cooking, and let me tell you what I think.
He laughs at himself too, which I love.
Yeah, there's a moment in the album where he is on the radio, but he says, did I tell you this one? I think I told you this one, but let me tell you this story. And I was like, I love this man so much. Yeah. Truly, in all the research, I haven't found a single thing to complain about with him. He's annoyingly good. Yeah. And when I was doing the work, when I was reading through everything, my boyfriend was like, "Well, I know you love Mark Twain. How do you think of Will Rogers compared to Mark Twain? Like, which one do you like more?" And when I think about it, Will Rogers is like a seemingly perfect human being, and Mark Twain is like riddled with faults. Like he's just like dripping in character flaws and like problems and dumb decisions. And I think that's why I really was like love Mark Twain, because I like I think there's something charming about them, and they just both appear, not to keep bringing up Twain, but they seem so parallel in my mind.
Sure.
And they're both able to be so real while being very much themselves, which I respect them both for. I'm sure Will would be the first one to talk about some of his own faults, but I've yet to spy any.
My God, yeah. I love so much that there is. I love really, really, really subversive satire and humor where it's this, and it seems not gray. It's a tone of periwinkle where I enjoy this. I can sit back and enjoy it. And you don't, if you're middle America, and I don't mean that in an insulting way, but if you're living in the part of America where all you have to do is work all day and you do not want to be reminded that shit is crazy and shit has been crazy, which by the way is still a convenient part of privilege, to not be reminded of the garbage every day.
For a guy like to not think about it.
Thank you. Yes. For a guy like this to then slip in all kinds of jokes about how we stole America and how we killed and raped the Indians, and to do it and still get laughs.
Oh my gosh.
And to not come across as a city guy. Yeah. And that's a skill. And I don't think it's anybody's right to not be alienated, but I think it is a brilliant genius who can make that point, get a laugh, maybe make the point subtly and let it get into their bloodstream and not alienate them. That is a brilliant piece of art.
And if anyone needed that, it was, ranchers in Oklahoma in 1929. I mean, come on. That's when Hey, I don't know if you knew this. The Depression was bad. Things were really bad. And so it wasn't easy to make people laugh. But I also think people were really open to finding things that allowed them to not think about the one or two things that were bad during the Depression. So I appreciate Will Rogers for what he did for people in that sense, and I am envious that I don't have a Will Rogers of my own in this time.
It's like if in the 80s Bruce Willis had been a leftist in any way. He's a giant conservative. If he had in any way been liberal and decided he was also going to do weird humor because everybody thinks he's super American because he's Die Hard Man. I was just trying to think. There's no John Wayne for the 80s. Fuck John Wayne. But I'm just saying, no cowboy for the 80s. I'm like, nah, it's probably Bruce Willis. Like he's probably like what every man thinks they should be, and except that
Yeah, well, that's the thing about. I don't know what the everyman looks like now or looks like then. I really don't know, but he definitely was what people thought. He was like what Americans think other Americans are like.
Yes.
If that makes sense. I think that was something like
brilliant.
that. Yeah, it's like his probably the thing that doesn't actually exist, that like agrarian ideal. And that kind of like Americana. That's what it really comes down to. But when I think about anyone nowadays who talks about politics from a like left populist, save the people perspective, and Will Rogers was very much save the people and very much save the planet. Anyone I can think of just seems really beaten down by the system that keeps winning. Like you look at John Oliver or Jon Stewart or Colbert, and they just have so much hurt behind their eyes. They just they seem very exhausted by the system. And Will Rogers is someone who very much was aware of all of the faults, but didn't ever seem like it broke him in any way. Like he seemed to be able to have isn't this an interesting, couldn't we do it better?
Right.
Don't you think we could maybe do it better? And in the Bacon, Beans, and Limousines monologue, he is definitely coming from a more sober place than I had seen him previously. But he still doesn't seem all is lost.
No, and he gets the word's not even heated, but pointed for sure. And there's a point where, and I just for anybody who's listening or watching the video version of this, it's the humor. I enjoy it. I definitely enjoy it. It is definitely of another time. So they're definitely. I wasn't laughing out loud, but I was like, good joke, funny joke, nice bit. Hey, I wrote that joke later on, so I stole from Will Rogers. Cool.
Aww.
That felt good, right? So it is. It's different watching, I watched him speaking it because they recorded it. So there's a point where the comedy for what it is, the humor for what it is, does kind of stop, and he's just he's still being him, which is I think inherently funny, which is a positive and one of the reasons it works. But yeah, he gets very kind of sober about the state of things and how things are fucked up, and does it in the most plain language he possibly can. Stumbles. He's very stumbly, but also that's charming. And it was powerful. Like, it was just because it was coming out of this guy, and just this simple idea that people trusted him.
Oh my God. Yeah. The most trusted man in America.
You then see why Frank Capra had such a boner for the everyman, and didn't quite do it justice, because it feels like Meet John Doe is kind of like if Will Rogers became, an actual politician. It doesn't quite work in the same way. But yeah, I don't know. It's again charming and also very powerful, I thought.
Yeah, he has a great way of taking big concepts and just making them seem like they're just occurring to him about the way the world should work. And doesn't it make sense that the people who don't have money should be helped by the people who do have money? Doesn't it sound weird that we have more corn than any other country, but yet so many of us are going hungry?
So good.
It's such a simple, pure idea. There's also a part in the album where he talks about how pioneers were just people that wanted something for free.
Yep.
And he does a good job of dressing down some of the American myth making. Because he's not he's patriotic, but he's not blind to the reality of what this country was built on, which is killing and suffering in many ways. And
he doesn't
a remarkable thing to balance.
I guess I didn't. I'm sure everybody then knew there was a period of time. It's interesting because at the same time that he was a humorist and coming up as a humorist, the vice president of the United States, Charles Curtis, was was he 1/8? I think he was 1/8 Kaw Indian.
Okay.
And I don't even know if that's true. That is what he claimed. And he claimed it as it was meant to be this sort of, it's just weird that at this time that this was a thing you could claim to seem more American, when you would think people would be like, oh, he's part Indian, like, fuck that guy. But this was something he used to seem more legitimate. And so I guess I kind of forget it was a different point in time. But also, again, he's a quarter Cherokee, Will Rogers is, and he gets to talk about it. And he talks about it openly. So it is this element of curiosity and this element of extra Americanism, or at least should be perceived that way. And he gets to talk about it. He's like, maybe my Cherokee blood makes me a little biased. I hope not. Like, he's just like, and I'm like, oh God, I love it so much. It's
and he's not just a quarter Cherokee in the way that white people are like, I'm part Native American. He was born in Oregon Territory. His father was a part of the Cherokee Senate. He grew up in this world. I think he had Cherokee heritage on both sides. He was very much a part of that community, which gives him that perspective. He's famous for being from Oklahoma, but he was born in Oklahoma when it wasn't yet a state. It was straight up, it was Indian Territory. Technically speaking, if you want to be this actually type person, he never lived in Oklahoma. Yeah. Which is a fun, dumb fact. But you have to remember that America at that time wasn't even America yet. We have to go so far back to remember. And that reminds us that, the settlement and the Native Americans and the Civil War, all of this is so real and so fresh, right? Yeah. And you can't just put it in a place in your mind that being an Indian makes you cool. This is still a huge part of the country at that time, Very, very real.
Yeah. And that he just openly talks about it, and it is part of who he is, an accepted part of his act, accepted part of his personality, and people laugh at it. They give it the laugh it deserves, and they also, I think, because of that, are giving a little bit more credence to him talking about us slaughtering Native Americans. It's, I don't know,
Yeah.
that it's such a free part of it. I was like, oh, this is great. It was like so refreshing to hear him talk, because that's some of my favorite shit. Some of my favorite,
Yeah.
I think American comedy is like Stan Freberg's History of the U.S. There's some really great shit in there about the Native American. It's not perfect. It's imperfect because he's not Native American, but there's some really good stuff in it.
Well, then nothing's more fun than watching like British comedians make fun of Americans. Like I'm not just British, all over the world, but I love when people make fun of America. It's so fun. It's so fun to see the other perspectives. Do you know the story about him and like trickle down economics?
This is
like a fun.
No, please.
I don't know if he necessarily coined that term, but he is the one who like talked about that and talked about it as an ironic moment. And then Reagan came in later and was like, yeah, but we're actually going to do that though.
Yeah.
But he has this, I want to read it to you because it's just so good. And I don't want to paraphrase it and ruin it. But okay, so this is Will Rogers. The Republicans didn't start thinking of the old common fellow till just as they started out on the election tour. The money was all appropriated for the top in the hopes that it would trickle down to the needy. He knew that water trickled down, put it uphill and let it go, and it would reach the driest little spot. But he didn't know that money trickled up. Give it to the people at the bottom, and the people at the top will have it by night anyhow. But at least it will have passed through the little poor fellow's hands. They saved the big banks, but the little one went up the flue. So that's from a speech from 1932. But this idea that like if you give the money to the people at the bottom, the rich people are going to have it by night anyway. Like at least let it pass through their hands before it goes up. Like that's a comedian. He called himself a humorist at that time, but that's a comedian saying that trickle-down economics doesn't work in 1932.
It's fucking insane.
Like, we failed Will Rogers in so many ways.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's so... I don't mean to just talk about politics this whole episode, but...
I think it's unavoidable. We're talking about very good satire and very good... it's good.
Well, politics is on the brain. I mean, it's hard to avoid in and outside of comedy right now.
What's funny is, like, I think that's the first quote we've even done. We haven't even gone through... Because he is, like, a quote farm, for lack of a better word. Have you read his autobiography? Because I have it, and I needed to crack it open before this, but I wasn't able to.
I have not. No. When did it come out? Do you know?
I do not know, but I will tell you my copy
sometime in the 30s,
wants to fall apart. So yeah, it's from the 20s or 30s. So I'm gonna have to dig through.
He's in the ranks of Twain and Lincoln and Marilyn Monroe and those people who said everything that's ever been said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything is attributed to them. Oh, Oscar Wilde is also on that list.
Yes, very much.
They're just the people that are quoted to death.
Yeah.
And be careful with Google because he probably didn't say most of what you're reading. But you can go to willrogers.com and look at the quotes.
My mom always said an eye for an eye. That wasn't him. That was the Bible. No, please stop it. Stop it. Yeah, I mean, and I don't even know that I could. I mean, I did write down some stuff from the record that stuck out to me. It's like, oh, that's a good line. That's a good line.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
The organized party one is the most famous one I've heard. I'm not a part of any organized political party. I'm a Democrat.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, that's solid.
Sure.
He also was smart enough to also do that. To just like it was not punching in every direction. It was also self-punching a little bit of that because he was smart.
Sure.
He knew to make himself the butt of the joke a little bit at the very least.
Right. Well, and he wasn't, I mean, we think of political comedians and we forget he wasn't out for blood at all. If he ever thought that he offended someone, he felt terrible for like weeks. He was not that type of guy. He was so ready to apologize. He was not there to like hunt anyone. You know, he was friends with these people. He knew how to talk to people at the top and talk to a common man and not alienate anyone. And so I guess there are probably political people nowadays who would critique him for not holding people accountable, for being probably too nice to people that did some very bad things. But I think you have to remember that the fact that he didn't do that is what made him so successful, you know?
Yeah, and reached a third of the fucking country. Good Christ.
Yeah. Can you imagine anyone that famous nowadays?
No, that doesn't exist anymore.
Like, who is the most trusted man in America right now? I have no idea.
I can't. No. Like just the same as I
Is
can't
it
be
Joe
like,
Rogan?
well,
I'm serious.
I'm gonna go.
Who is it?
I'm gonna go crack the cyanide cap in my molar right now. Give me a second.
No, but I'm serious.
I know. I don't. Yeah. In terms of like falsely or otherwise, who's trusted the most? Yeah, I guess it's who the fuck is listened to the most, and that is.
Well, I don't think there's any art form that you can produce as consistently and in terms of volume as like a podcast or a radio show. So it's definitely a podcast host or a radio host.
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Is it like Rush Limbaugh or something like that?
Oh God,
maybe?
it might be.
In terms of like a plurality?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, it might be. It might be.
I don't know. We don't need to go this direction.
All you're doing is making me sad and sad.
I'm sorry.
And sad.
Let's
That's
pull
fine.
ourselves back out of this. So wait, tell me about Dick Davey, because I don't know anything about him.
Okay, so God, and I'm gonna apologize to the audience in advance. First of all, this is gonna be a long episode. Hope you're cool with that, Katie. Second of all,
we have a lot to cover.
My audience has heard the Dick Davey story a million times, but so Cliff Nestroff did my show in 2014 or so, and he was like. Yeah, and he's great. And he's like, I want to talk about this guy named Dick Davey. I'm like, okay, don't know who that is, but I'll find his record and I'll listen to it. And I did. And I'm like, oh, this is fun. This is good. It's this Arkansas comedian who is talking race relations, but he's doing it in this very Will Rogers way. He's like, oh, it's too bad that this can't happen and this can't happen. And, and he does it. And this album is recorded at the Apollo. A lot of a big deal was made of the fact that he's a white guy at the Apollo, which is like a little condescending, but I still think it was important to note that the audience loved the shit out of him. And they are a notoriously tough audience. Race barrier doesn't matter. They're just a tough audience.
Sure.
They loved him. The record is very good, and it is all about race relations. The first one came, oh God, I can never remember the date. I think it's 66. I think it's the 66 and the 67. Okay. I should know this better. I'm now his archivist, but like I haven't dealt with it in a while.
Having dates memorized doesn't mean you know more or less about a thing.
That's true.
Don't be too hard on yourself.
That's fair. But it's very much very Will Rogers-y. And long story short, Cliff didn't know who he was. Nobody knew who he really was. Like, what was his real name? Is his real name Dick Davey? There were stories maybe he was actually Jewish, blah, 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 blah. And then a couple years ago, some crazy shit happened in my life, and I decided to delve in. I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to try and find Dick Davey one more time. I had tried previously because I wanted to help him out. I was like, cool, Cliff, hey, look, maybe I can help find him for you. And I didn't tell him that. I was like, I'm not going to be a failure. I'll only tell him once I find him. So 2018, at the very end, I did a lot of digging for a month and a half, couple months, and I found he passed away in 2011 or so. But I found his family, and I spoke with all them. Yes, he was the son of a very famous rabbi in Upper West Side of Manhattan. He and started as a folk singer, became a comedian. Wow. He did that whole path. And but also, he was a part of this thing called the 10-Gallon Trio. The 10-Gallon Trio went around to schools and sang not folk music, but Americana music. So a lot of cowboy songs, which I think is where he learned this twang and where he picked up that Arkansas is where his character is from. Specifically, by the way, Evening Shade. Evening Shade has only made an appearance in the consciousness then and on the show Evening Shade. Just a weird coincidence. And but before he became, between becoming Dick Davey, he had various different names. His real name was Richard Hoffman. In between that, he started billing himself as the Jewish Will Rogers. And now I understand why. Because the style is exactly the same. He laughs at himself in the same way. He's putting on kind of, obviously an accent, but putting on a voice and a manner that is like, oh, this is so Will Rogers, it's undeniable. So he's billed as the Jewish Will Rogers, and I got to pull up the name, but I was interviewing his widow. She's his girlfriend, but his widow and his niece. And his widow was like, he was supposed to play some comedian on stage, and he was always so angry he didn't get the part. I'm like, did Hal Holbrook beat him out for fucking Mark Twain Tonight? She's like, maybe that was it. So, no, maybe it was Will Rogers. And I'm like, huh. And then I look it up.
Will Rogers' son played him.
Will Rogers' son did play him, but then there was a thing called Will Rogers USA that was put on in the 70s. It was before another big show about him, and it was produced by a guy named George Spota, who also produced and directed Dick Davey's first album. So that's why he thought he was going to get the part, I think.
You're such a sleuth. Oh my goodness.
So it's now all tying together, so that I now have to interview his widow again, hopefully in person when I come to New York at some point. And I just want to dig in because I now think that Will Rogers is such a huge part of the puzzle that I wouldn't have really thought about hard enough. I was going to dig into the Will Rogers thing eventually, but you now forced me to, and it's now blown up a whole lot more in my brain. Because I was like, why the accent? Why this? I'm like, he was doing this Western music, but why? And I think he probably did it all because he must have loved Will Rogers. I don't think it's a coincidence.
No, and that's a great example of something that someone over the age of 70 would be able to solve for you in 4 seconds,
Easily.
Right? But then in our generation, you have to, that's the point of being a historian or an archivist. You have to find that all out yourself. There's so many things that I would love to know that would take me 10 plus hours of research that anyone over a certain age could tell me in a minute.
This is what's killing me is like trying to interview people about Dick Davey too, because they're all dying. Like, to be frank, they're all dying. And like, I almost had somebody who's definitely worked with Dick Davey, and he's like, no, I'm not interested right now. Cool. He was going to do it, and then he's like, no, I can't. I'm too busy. Or not too busy. I'm not up for it. I'm like, that's fair. I'm not going to blame you, but it would have been.
I will blame you.
Yeah, right. I bet I would have gotten 2 usable sentences out of an hour interview, honestly, and that's what I count on. That's fine. I just want to know who he was as a performer, because here's the other thing. He would do that accent off stage. I've talked to people who's like, oh, I didn't know he was Jewish. He was doing the Arkansas accent backstage. So
like the Prestige, you got to live it.
Right. I'm like, that's some Andy Kaufman shit. What is going on? And I don't know why. His girlfriend doesn't know why. His niece didn't know him well enough to know why. His girlfriend doesn't know why. Yeah, because by the time she met him, he had quit. He was just a teacher.
Oh, it was just in the past.
Mm-hmm.
They never talked about this huge part of his life.
A little. She's got his scrapbook, and his scrapbook is a very scrapbook that is described in the only interview that was ever really done with him. And she's still got the scrapbook, and I'm like, and she sent me something from it, and but that's it. That's where his career lies, is in this scrapbook and on these 2 albums that I don't think she even owns the albums.
Oh, what a fun little mystery. I love that.
So long story short, I'm very excited and happy, and again, that you helped me make it about me. But no, that you discovered, that you made me dig into something I would have needed to anyway. And again, it just blew up a huge part of the story. Yeah.
Well, if there was any time, at least for me, that I wanted a project to sink my teeth into, it's quarantine. Yeah, I've been real hungry I was like, what's the most nerdy, heady of these albums that I can really educate myself on? And I had a blast talking with my grandmother and talking with my boyfriend's grandfather, and like,
oh, wonderful.
Just immersing myself, watching everything, listening to everything a bunch. Just such a blast. And I definitely, I feel like I know so much about stand-up, and I know so much about Mark Twain, but there was this kind of like 40 years in the middle that I just don't know enough about. Speaking of Cliff, he's the king of that era where I know so little. He knows so much about the like 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, the mob run scene that I'm very undereducated and underexposed to. So it has been such a pleasure to learn more about Will Rogers. But listening to so much Will Rogers, I feel like I understand my grandmother a bit more, even though he wasn't that big in her life, but he was big in her parents' life. And, she was born in 31 in Illinois and grew up there. Her family was from Hume, her parents' family. So there's so much in the way that she talks and the jokes that she makes. She always loved Letterman. She really just kind of likes that kind of Midwestern. She liked early Letterman, I'll say. But she likes that kind of dry, smart, a little, maybe like just some touches of like, I'm going to sneak this joke in, And it's been fun to learn more about her in this process. It's been a real pleasure there. Yeah.
Well, and I honestly, I appreciate you, interviewing her, which I don't know where I'll throw it in, but I'll throw it in either at the very end or somewhere in the middle of our conversation. But dope. It's very sweet. I love that you talked to her about it. It was, I don't know. And like I can tell that she's a funny woman, not just because she was funny, but that fucking energy. Holy shit, man.
Oh my God. She's a hoot. She is like the queen of her retirement community. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Every old man is in love with her. Like, she is just the best. She has this group of friends. They can't right now, obviously, because they're all in isolation during Corona times. But she has this group of friends. They all hang out at the fireplace every night and like gab. Yes. I was at her place like a few months ago, and I don't know if she'd like me telling the story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. There was the phone rang, and it was this guy that lives in her complex who was like offering to drive us somewhere, and she's like, "No, we're fine." Like she just has these like suitors that are like
so good.
knocking on her door. She's a queen. Everyone loves her within 5 minutes of meeting her. She's just a big ol' ham, and I love her very much.
That's so good.
Yeah, she was a big part of I was just raised in a household that had, I think, good taste in comedy, which has
apparently
paid some dividends here.
Yeah, right.
Couldn't we use a Will Rogers today? I have listened to all of this all day long, and I'm just hopped with it. But I kept thinking, because I knew you were going to call me, and I kept thinking, we need someone like Will Rogers today. Just a homebody who's not trying to impress you. He just is what he is. He chews his gum. He runs around with his little rope, and he just says nice things, and he tells the truth. He told the truth, and yet people absolutely loved him. And in our country now, nobody's telling the truth. Well, nobody loves anybody. I called him. In fact, I wrote up at the top of this piece of paper, I called him my kind of a ho-hum with ho-hum humor. I mean, he wasn't out to make you just double over with laughter. He was just out to kind of, I've seen a couple of movies of his where he's just standing there swinging that lasso, and then all of a sudden he'll think of something, and it's sort of funny, but the longer you think about it, the funnier it is.
There's no urgency to it.
No, he's just telling truthism. The Republicans loved him just as much as the Democrats did. He got to a lot of these guys, and he used to name them too. Dad was a Republican, Mom was a Democrat, and they both adored him. So, he had friends on all sides of the aisle. And Will Rogers basically was such a Democrat, but my dad just, everything that Will Rogers said could be applied to their lives at that time. He helped the people recover. I think he helped people recover from the Depression, because everywhere people went, they were telling Will Rogers stories. Everybody knew who Will Rogers was, and everybody knew what he'd just said the day before. I remember my grandfather Thompson, when he would say something about Will Rogers, and they would talk about when he crashed in the airplane with Wiley Post, and my grandfather would tear up, literally. I mean, they felt Will Rogers was a member of the family.
Sure.
And if you had to sit at the table every Sunday with my grandpa, you knew everything Will Rogers had said during the week. Seriously.
Yeah. Sure.
Because that's all they could talk about. There wasn't anything else going on in Hume, Illinois. We want our comedians now to be sharp, and we want them to make us laugh right away. Okay?
Yeah.
You're out there on the stage. Yeah, say something funny right now. Make me laugh. But
we don't let them live in it as much.
Yeah.
I feel like your sense of humor is often very Midwestern and low-key and kind of...
I hope so. I get it, honestly. I get it. And I will say almost anything if I think I can get a laugh. And I've never gotten tired, ever of Will Rogers. Yeah. And that's why you are talking to me now, that I quote him a lot. I sit by the fireplace with my friends, and they've all heard my Will Rogers quotes, so I'm going to have to find some new ones. And I won't expect my royalty check for a month or two, right?
Oh, sure. Well, you can have 50% of the money I make off of this, which will be $0.
I remember, going into college and somebody talking about philosophy. I took some philosophy courses because I really thought I was deep, and being like, wow, they were the first stand-ups. And I remember really thinking that was a deep fucking thought. And I'm now like, good Christ, I'm so glad there are people like you who exist who have better thoughts about things.
Well, that specific thing has been the bane of my existence, because every single comedy scholar has their vote for who the first stand-up comedian was, and they all disagree, and they all think that they're right and that no other opinions exist, myself included, obviously.
Sure.
But that seems to be the tent pole of a comedy scholar, is I know who the first one was. And it's such a silly pursuit because you have to first define stand-up comedy in order to define who the first one was.
Fair.
And that's such a fool's errand. There's like no
yeah.
There's no way to do that. I think in my definition of stand-up, Mark Twain and Will Rogers would be on that list, but not on someone else's definition.
Sure. Some people would probably be like, Charles Dickens got up and did, he did a tight five before he would do A Christmas Carol. So, he was probably the first stand-up. Yeah, everybody's got their own opinions on it, but they're all valid. Although I will say I do 100% subscribe to the Mark Twain theory. I've always thought that was, he was probably the best contender.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite comedy scholars and a good friend of mine is Professor Ian Brody, and he has a really interesting theory that I think you would have a good opinion on. He believes that the inception of stand-up is really tied to the invention of the microphone because it requires an intimacy and an ability to control a room and get that feedback. Like, you have to be able to allow the audience to participate, but then know that you can get them back. And having the microphone allows you to do that, which I think is like a really wonderful theory. Yeah. What do you think about that? Because I think it suits the timeline quite well.
No, I mean, that's incredibly smart. And I think we are tempted to avoid using technological demarcation to define something like that because we're like, well, they have the intent to do such and such, or they, the art was still there. And we think somehow maybe that the technological demarcation then maybe eliminates all the effort that was done before it. But I think that is a smart way to do it. I mean, crooners technically couldn't have existed before the microphone. There were you couldn't. You can't sing like this and then fucking everybody hears you. It doesn't exist. Sure. Get a microphone in front of Frank Sinatra and he sounds like a god. I think that's a really interesting
it's a fun,
theory on
experiment.
it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
and if you want to go a little bit no, because that's the other thing too. Is before the microphone, obviously, in terms of like recorded media, there were no real microphones. There were fucking tubes funnels going down into a cylinder. But there wasn't stand up. There was rarely a comedy monologue. Not that there were none, but a comedy monologue also totally different from stand up. Not the same thing. That's interesting.
Yeah, so it's a fun thing. I've heard Bob Hope, I've heard Charlie Case, I've heard Lenny Bruce, I've heard Mark Twain and Will Rogers. Like, there's a million people that get touted, but I think at the end of the day, I think what is stand-up comedy isn't the most fruitful question to be asking. I think the questions of what it has done and what it has been and what it can be, I think are more fruitful questions to ask.
Yeah. I've been digging to the other end. I've been trying to figure out what the first recorded sketch comedy ever was. And I still don't know what it is because I'm also struggling to define what sketch comedy is.
Sure.
Because if you dig far back enough, vaudeville is its own thing, and then eventually sketch comedy becomes something, but there's an in-between, and I don't know if it's a hard line, and I don't know if it's sound effects. I don't know what it is, but I found a few contenders. If you're like a minstrel, like when does that become sketch? Because there are definitely like group. I know a minstrel show has a very specific format, but there has to be early minstrelsy and vaudeville that we would call sketch, right? I would think so, and I was also trying to figure out, is a two-dude, and they're mostly dudes, obviously, but a two-dude sketch a sketch, or is it like something else? Is it just a dialogue? Like, is there something else that makes it sketch beyond these two fuckers just making jokes? Hey, I saw your wife the other day. That wasn't my wife. That was blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know. I don't know if that's a sketch. That's what I'm also wondering. I don't know. Maybe. But like the second I hear a sound effect, my brain is like, that's a sketch. So that's where part of where my brain went, but that can't just be it either. It might be a plot, but then could you also then say that this, if the jokes kind of tie together, is there sort of a plot too? I'm so up my own ass on this.
Wait, are there any stand-up comedians who do, like Gary Goldman does sketch sorta in his stand-up.
Like
you could make that argument.
Sure. Yeah.
Like how the states got abbreviated in the Trader Joe's. If you're going back and forth between multiple characters, I think you could make a very academically ridiculous thesis statement thing that is sketch, and I would read it.
Yeah, no, I've also wondered the same thing.
That.
Yeah, it's a valid question because story, multiple characters.
Yeah.
But and I don't know. I think so, because that's why I've also had trouble organizing some of my records sometimes. I'm like, is this stand up? And also, when it's a character, is it stand up anymore? I'm not even sure.
Yeah.
It is, but is it,
don't you miss character comedy? I miss
Yes.
it so much.
Yes.
Oh.
I mean,
I have such an affinity for that stuff.
Do you have a particular favorite though?
Oh my God. Gun to my head, the first thing is Bobcat Goldthwait.
Oh, sure.
I have such a random love of Bobcat Goldthwait that my nerdy comedy, like, elitist friends cannot understand.
That's
and
funny.
neither can I, but I just adore him.
Have they heard Meet Bob? Meet Bob is a very funny album.
It's so funny that it got him to... Didn't Kurt Cobain love it, and that's why he opened for Nirvana?
That I did not fucking know. That's amazing.
Oh my God, yeah, he used to open for Nirvana.
Oh, that's really funny.
What a specific time and place in American history. Bobcat Goldthwait and Nirvana. It's just like, it paints such a picture.
That makes no sense. That's really funny. Yeah. And what I also love, I think I talked about this with somebody the other, it was Jimmy Pardo, because that was one of the few sketches that I liked in that Comic Relief album we were talking about, was Bobcat Goldthwait literally getting up and they were saying, I can't really do comedy, without, I'm better in the shower. And then they bring a fucking shower on stage and he gets in the shower. And I loved it. It's dumb, but I loved it.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I miss like big concepts like that.
Yeah.
You see it sometimes, but the 80s was just such a wild time, and I would have I think I would have eaten it up.
Yeah.
And I would have been in line with the culture that was very tired of it when they were tired of it, and then alt was born, and I would have been I think my sensibilities skew more alt on a broad scale, but I love alt and club comedy. But damn, some of that wild stuff, I love it.
It's interesting that a combination of that and just tired stand-up led to... I like alt comedy as well, but I think it's also incredibly cynical. Like, it is at its heart so cynical.
Sure.
It's a response to something else. It's also a response to what they find to be cynical. So I respect that, because I the idea that, like, this staid, boring, every bit of comedy everybody else is doing, got the fucking sleeves rolled up, and you're making the same observation everybody else is, women be shopping. That is cynical too. So a response to that was necessary, but then there becomes this point where it's like, okay, you're bitter and you're ironic, and I got a little tired of it after a while.
Yeah, well,
I
that's
lived
why
through the
it
90s.
swings both ways. Yeah.
I barely lived through the 90s, but enough.
I lived through the 90s, but I was 6 when they ended, so
yeah,
I don't think
young.
that counts.
We get it. Do you have a... My God, there's so many good quotes on here. I got to tell you also, there's this bit that was so up my alley and so dark, where he's just talking about... It's the bit he repeats at the beginning and towards the end of the album, which is like blah, 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 blah day, or something week, whatever week it was.
Oh, yeah. We gave him a day.
We gave him yeah.
It was
and
presidents and then mothers.
And he's talking about all the different... And one of the things he says is, don't beat your wife week. And I was just like, damn, that's dark, but also that's my style of dark. Like, I was like, it's rough. For those who... I don't find domestic abuse funny. I do find talking about it outwardly interesting and fascinating. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, there were some moments in this. I think if you just listen to our conversation thus far, you might get an impression that it's more sanitized than it was, because there were some pretty edgy parts in that special. The one that comes to my mind first is talking about... There's a moment in the album where he talks about how people complain about prices for buying land and for expanding, and how when the settlers got here, they just had to shoot another Indian when they wanted to expand. Like, what a terrible joke. And then there's some tag too where he's like, they could just get the lead back after dissecting the Indians to make more bullets. You were like, damn, Will Rogers, like, get him. Shite.
And at the same time, I'm also like, I'm having the thought I have when somebody like an early Dave Chappelle or other people, where it's like, who's laughing for the right reasons and who's laughing for the wrong reasons. But I don't know that he cared. I think you have to get up there with the hope that it's reaching everybody in the right way, and then the reality that it's reaching a tiny percentage. But there's that, and there's something about there never being a picture of a pilgrim praying who wasn't also holding a gun. Oh, it's good. It's good. Good.
And he had there was a moment too where he told a joke and then he said that his wife didn't like it and wanted him to tell it differently. And I was like, I don't know if it's true or not, but I just love picturing them like workshopping his bits earlier that day. And she's like giving him constructive criticism.
Right.
It's such a beautiful image.
Oh, maybe she's like, what's Jim
really
Gaffigan's wife's name?
it.
Is it Jeannie?
Jeannie?
Yeah. So she's the Jeannie Gaffigan of her time.
Yeah.
That's so fucking funny.
She's like giving him punch-up notes. It's such a charming visual in my
it's really
head.
good.
Yeah. So there's I think the album is definitely worth listening to. There's a ton about America. There's a ton about Roosevelt, ton about Prohibition. I wonder if you feel this way, because I was struck with a very specific feeling when I listened to this album for the first time, because you understand the words that he's saying, right? But sometimes the sentences take a few listens to understand, and there were a lot of names and a lot of references that I didn't get, but I knew the ideas of what he was saying, and I could imagine what he was saying, but it really made me feel like a little kid again. When you're like around adults and you sort of know what they're saying, but you really don't know what they're talking about. I had like a sense memory back to being 5 and smiling and nodding to what adults were saying, but like not really knowing what was going on.
Right.
Which I could imagine some people finding that very annoying, but I find it kind of like charming. I'm just like, yeah, okay, I sure, yeah.
I like having to work for it a little.
Agree.
Right?
Sure.
I mean, working to figure it out is
names,
like,
but...
it's not nothing. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, there's a bit where he talks about having his work read into the congressional record right in there with Huey Long and all the other humorists, like, it's just all this, like, and I also like very much, that's another big fuck you. It's like, okay, cool. Read my work into the congressional record. Also, fuck you for doing it. Without saying it. And he said it so cordially where it's like, fuck yourself. Like, that's just how, that's how it reads, but he's just being so sweet. But yeah, I think it's perfectly legitimate to sit and like, take your time on it and ponder on it. Just because it doesn't register immediately doesn't mean it's nothing. That's, I think a lot of people have that problem with older comedy. Dick Davey, in between, he's already had his Arkansas character, but in between being a guy, but he was integrating music into his comedy at the time still. So he's in between folk music and Dick Davey, meaning I'm performing at the Apollo, no guitar, none of that bullshit. I'm just doing stand-up. There's a bit where he literally is like, so what's in the paper? Like, he literally also pulls out the paper, and he pulls a Will Rogers and does that too. And what's funny is if you ever listen to those, you're always like, that's not true. That's not really in the paper. But he was more Jay Lenoing it. He's like, here's a funny bit that was written into the paper. And I'm like, that's not real. But I'm like, wait a minute. Free subscription. Let me go to newspapers.com. Let me look. And 100% it's from a real paper. He actually pulled it from a real paper.
That's so funny.
Because I'm like, this has got to exist somewhere. It just seems to, I'm like, and I find that more legit. I'm like, he didn't make up every bit that was in there. But anyway, that was just another little coincidence.
I love it. Yeah. Also, I think it's important to also think about when he passed away. We haven't talked about this at all, but he died in a plane crash in 1935. He was in his 50s. He was very young still. And we could talk for a very long time about how much we were robbed of a Will Rogers who would have aged perfectly, right? Like, he's already playing 20 years older than he is in so many ways. But the nation really mourned him, and it was a big moment. NBC and CBS went off air during his funeral.
Wow.
Like, movie theaters went dark. Like, people really were affected by it. The whole country sort of went into mourning, and even FDR like made a statement about it. Like, it was a huge moment. Yeah, FDR made a speech about how he was just so loved by his countrymen and how important his humor was, and how it like went to the hearts of his fellow men. So it's, I that's one more piece of this puzzle that reminds you of the scale of which his fame was reaching, and just how important he was to his people, Yeah. And wild that we just don't know who he is anymore.
I know. I was going to make a really facetious joke about how he, based on his level of fame, he was really the Jake Paul of his day. I've refused to make that joke. I refuse to make that joke. I'm just saying that I thought it.
Is he Jake Paul or Joe Rogan? Who's to say?
I don't fucking know. I barely know who Jake Paul is, except that he looks like a Nazi. Now, boy, oh boy. So you've already made an argument for this album, Katie. So I think we've already talked about why you should listen to it, and I think it's worth it. It's not gonna be quick snappity snap laughs. You're gonna have to pay attention. So just know that
if you're really like going for it, listen at 1.5 speed. I won't tell anyone. You know.
I do not co-sign that. I cannot in good conscience. So this is going to come out, like I said, in a couple weeks. So where can people find you? What do you have coming up?
Sure. Well, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want. That's where I make video essays about stand-up comedians and trends in stand-up. Also, I think last time I was on, I talked about how I was working on a chapter in a book, and that book is now out.
Oh yes,
which is very exciting. I can hold it in my dang hands. So I helped write 2 chapters for an academic press book about the dark side of stand-up comedy, which was a blast, and it features really smart people. Ian Brody, who I mentioned earlier, was a contributor as well, who I adore. But it's a fun little academic book, and makes me feel like such an adult, and
right, as it should.
So I'm really proud of that. Yeah, but you can follow me on Instagram. I don't really tweet, but I guess you can follow me there if you want to.
Sure.
I probably tweet like once a month, and I don't really enjoy it. But
it's fair. It's not a fun place to be, really.
Yeah. What about you? What are you up to? What do you?
Oh boy, I don't give a shit. That doesn't matter. I will just say, people, you should definitely watch Katie's YouTube videos. They're fantastic. They're brilliant.
Thank you. I
love them. Oh, you know what? I do have a podcast coming up. I think I already mentioned it, called Looking Forward. By the time this comes out, it is not out yet, but you can subscribe to it, because right now the feed is just the audiobook from my book from 2008, which is poorly recorded and poorly read. But you know what? It really should have just been me riffing, because that character only works when you're improvising. But that's fine. Go listen to that or watch the movie. Go to lookingforwardmovie.com.
Should I make a video about Will Rogers? What do you think?
Oh my God, yes. Of course you should. Yes, absolutely. That'd be amazing.
I don't know if anyone... no one knows who he is. I guess I will take it upon myself to educate.
Yeah, it's your job. It is now your job. The onus is on you.
Okay.
I want to thank everybody for listening. And thank you again, Katie, for being here.
Happily.
And as always, have a good thing. Comedy on Vinyl is a production of StolenDress Entertainment. It is produced by Mike Warden and is hosted and edited by Jason Klom. Our theme song was composed and performed by Richard Levinson. You can email us at podcast@comedyonvinyl.com. You can also send snail mail to StolenDress Entertainment, P.O. Box 805, Burbank, California, 91503. Subscribe to Comedy on Vinyl on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else you can find podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It helps. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Comedy on Vinyl, or find everything in one place at comedyonvinyl.com. A major portion of Comedy on Vinyl has been underwritten by Stand Up Records. Please visit standuprecords.com for all your comedy needs, and tune in to the new Stand Up Records channel available on the Roku, where you can also find select episodes of this podcast. Visit StolenDress.com to listen to our other podcasts, watch videos, and imbibe freely of our multimedia content going back 15 plus years. StolenDress Entertainment.
Hey, it's my turn.